Hello and welcome back to the Solo RolePlayers Podcast. I'm your host PJ, and today on the show I am thrilled to bring you another game designer. The designer of a game that has been a hot topic over in our Discord. It's one of my games on my 3x5 challenge, which I just finished yesterday actually, my 5th session of it. That game is Astroprisma, and the designer is Crescent Chimera. Welcome to the Solo RolePlayers Podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here.
Now, I have so much to ask you about Astroprisma. This is a game that for me came quite out of left field. I hadn't heard about it, particularly until in little bits and pieces people started recommending it to me all over the internet, both in my own circles and broader than that. And it's really captured my heart a little bit now that I've sat down and actually had some good sessions with it. But before we get into all of that, I like to start these chats hearing a bit of the story of how you yourself discovered tabletop role-playing games, how you got into the hobby in general. What is your story?
I would say it started around the pandemic. I was quite late to discovering tabletop role-playing games and that sort of thing. A lot of people in the industry I've noticed usually come from growing up with them or playing through their teenage years. I basically came across them through YouTube videos and through just looking through games in itch.io and then finding tabletop RPGs instead. And I particularly became obsessed at the time because I was trying to become a game developer, like a video game developer. And I was at university at the time as well. And I became really interested in solo RPGs. I was captured by a lot of the game mechanics. It was, I was familiar with things like Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of thing. But a lot of the systems, the structures, particularly the innovation that I saw in solo RPGs at the time, really captured my imagination and made me want to do something like that myself and sort of move on from video games into something in that format.
Do you remember some of the first solo RPGs that you came across that struck your attention?
Yeah, I'm not sure which one was like the first one that really caught me. I think it was one of the games by Mousehold Press. I believe their imprint is called. They make games. Probably their biggest one is this game called Artifact. It's this game about basically making up the story of a weapon that you would use, for example, in like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. This sort of through a series of like creative writing questions and prompts and these sort of things makes you create the story and the sort of characters that use that weapon over time. And it gives a lot of depth to objects that in a normal RPG campaign, like a normal fantasy campaign, you wouldn't have such sort of depth and story to them. That one was very innovative. It really caught my eye. And then I would say the next biggest one that really changed my perspective on them was this game called Miru, Miru. That game really inspired me to make Astroprisma. A lot of the core sort of elements or ideas are very similar. In a way, Astroprisma sort of started as like a hack of Miru with different setting and components and other mechanical ideas, and it grew into what it is now. But Miru was the first one that I played a lot of hours, a lot of campaigns, and it really made me think about the game design and how to maybe put my own spin into those sort of games.
That's really interesting. Miru was actually one of the first RPGs or solo RPGs that I played as well. And so it's interesting that thread is there. I didn't pick up that thread, but now that you mention it, that mixture of set events that we get in Astroprisma, I can now see that there. That's really cool.
Yeah, I would say because there's not really like a established structure to solo RPGs the way they play. You get very different types. And at the time, before I played Miru, all the solo RPGs that I played were very sort of narrative or more like creative writing in a way. And Miru was the first one that I encountered with that sort of random event, hex scroll, like those sort of elements that is more of my style in game
Yeah.
design.
Resource
That's,
management as
yeah,
well,
resource management. Some, I would say, more almost board game elements to the way the system works. And those were the main things that really attracted me to Miru compared to other games.
Yeah, really interesting. And so you hadn't played in any sort of traditional tabletop groups or anything like that beforehand, before the pandemic?
Not before, I played after.
Ah,
I got started by solo role-playing games and playing those sort of games.
fascinating. How long was it before you actually started turning this idea, this inspiration from Miru into its own thing? Because I must say, for anyone who has seen or played Astroprisma, it does not look like your standard, quickly made itch.io downloadable game. There's quite a bit more gone into it than that. So at what point did this become this big project that it did?
Um, it became like that very almost like out of surprise. At the time, my first idea for a game was not Astroprisma, was a different game that I'm now working on, which is going to become a board game. It's going to be the next thing I release, which was more of like a fantasy setting. It was more on the board game side with mechanics, deck building, that sort of thing, like a drafting sort of game. And then before I sort of got into that, I realized I basically like hit a wall when it came to the industry. You know, I was very inexperienced at the time. I didn't know how anything worked or how to contact providers or anything like that. And I basically realized that I didn't have neither the money nor the resources, contacts, or anything like that to make a board game out of nothing. So I thought I would start making like a smaller project, like an RPG zine or zine. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it was supposed to be like a much smaller thing. I was very inspired by Mouse Raider at the time. That sort of like small, easy to manufacture, sort of structure, but with like a lot of content inside and a lot of effort put into it. And so I started Astroprisma as like a side project to put before my main game. And then over time, I just made so much. The game just kept growing in terms of mechanics, ideas, encounters, story. Like as the game evolved over time, I realized that I kept bumping up the number of pages in the book, and at some point it became so many pages that now it has to be a book. And that was like a few years into the development of that. Chronologically, I would say I probably started Astroprisma in 2021, I would think. And yeah, like it just grew from there, grew apart from the book, it grew with the expansions and all the other content that I wanted to make for the game. And yeah, it was one of those developments that partly because the way I work, I'm very perfectionist, and I'm also, when I have an idea, I have a real hard time to say no. Like if it costs more money to print a book that is 20 more pages, but those 20 more pages have a lot of content that I want to have in the book, I will do it. So it's very difficult for me to say no to those sort of things. And when I have an idea for an expansion or something to contain myself and make them better financial decision or time decision not to do that. So yeah, it just kind of grew exponentially over time.
I mean, that really, really shows in the quality of the final product. I must say, I was blown away. I got the physical version just a few weeks ago, along with the pamphlet expansions, which is also a super cool idea, and was really. And I talked about it actually on the episode I did last week on the show, where I do my first look through the game and get a lot of rules wrong. but talk about it a little bit and just really, you can really see how that passion for the idea has come together and the perfectionism as well has come together to create something that is of a really, really high standard. And while I think the danger of that perfectionism can be that you don't actually finish stuff sometimes, it seems that you don't have that problem and you really push through to the end. So well done. It's a feat of design and game that you've put together here. Congratulations.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I wanted to ask as well a little bit, the visual art style that you have in the game is quite striking. I was initially concerned that it was going to make it difficult to navigate the book later, to reference it, which I think is a fair concern that people have. If you know games like Mork Borg, for example, it's beautiful, stylistic and all this stuff, but it can sometimes be difficult to actually find things. In my experience, though, I did find, as I played, like once I got through the first session or two, I found that because the visual style was so distinct for each rule or section or mechanic or concept that it was talking about, I actually found that helped me navigate things. I know now, and I played another session this morning when I was looking for equipment, I know to just flick until I see orange, and then I know that's the equipment, Was that design decision intentional to not only have this diverse art style, but also sort of constrain it a little bit, or what was the process of that?
Yeah, I mean, that was totally intentional. Things like the color coding of the different sections of the book. Some of the things regarding like visibility of tables or using bold typography in some areas. That was all intentional because I am very familiar with, I am a very aesthetic-driven person when I make anything, when I used to make games or when I do board games and TTRPGs now. Both when I'm buying a game and I'm reading it for the first time, that's the first thing that I usually look for because my sensitivities are more in graphic design than maybe some other areas. So that's the first thing that I look for and then I analyze. And also for my own work, that's the way I also come up with a lot of ideas for the game. I come up with a lot of ideas for the world or mechanics almost by drawing or by doing graphic design. So I'm a very aesthetic first person. So I knew going into the game that was going to be a very big part of it. And knowing that and having played other games that are like that I absolutely love, I also know that that's one of the criticisms that people often have with these sort of very visual games, that they're hard to read or hard to find specific things when you're flipping through the book during gameplay. So I try to be, as much as I'm very, I don't make any concessions when it comes to the aesthetic. Like I want the aesthetic to be a very prominent thing. I also want to add as many elements as I can to make it readable and make it easy to comprehend, easy to read on a first glance, and to be able to find things in the book easily.
It's really interesting to hear that you're designing the game in layout, basically, right? Is that what you're saying? So
that's exactly how I work. I've seen most people or a lot of people, they had this like sort of Microsoft Word type software and they just write the game. Yeah. And then they take that game, and sometimes because it's a different person that does the graphics, maybe that's a better workflow for that sort of scenario. They just take all the mechanics and everything they've written and then translate that to graphics, to a book, to graphic design. I'm the other way around. I make I make almost all the graphic elements first, and then I use that as like inspiration to make the game from that.
Right, because it sparks more ideas. I mean, you might accidentally draw something or bring in a visual element that go, oh wow, that looks cool, and that sparks an idea for some mechanic that goes into it. That's really encouraging for me to hear, because I'm stumbling into my very first early design project. Mm-hmm. And I found exactly the same. I looked at a page and I thought, well, I think I'm supposed to just write everything in Word now. And I thought, I can't do that. That's not how I engage with this stuff. It's never just in text. So I did the same thing. I went backwards and started. I mean, it's not a very visual book, but just even in terms of how the tables look or the layout of the pages. And I assumed I was doing it the wrong way. So it's very encouraging for me to hear that that's the way you approach it, even more so. So that's cool. What do you think comes over from your video game design experience? Like, what specifically in Astroprisma do you think comes from that?
Quite a lot of things. I would say probably the first one is that I usually come up with a lot of mechanical elements for the game. One of the criticisms that I've seen people make at some role-playing games, particularly the ones that I like, is that they don't have much role-playing in the traditional sort of, you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of thing, and you're sort of playing make-believe and sort of theater with other people around the table. They're more grounded on mechanical elements that you would see in a board game or a video game. And I mean, that is something that is totally true. Like, I am very attracted by that sort of design. And I think you can, it's funny, like, I was thinking about it the other day. At the beginning of video game history, a lot of the inspiration for video games came from role-playing games, right? Like, if you play, I don't know, the name escapes me right now. There's this, one of the earliest, like, RPGs that you would play in the 90s or in the 80s. Like, all of those were sort of different ideas or different ways that the developers at the time tried to translate, like, a Dungeons and Dragons session into what you could play in a computer.
But with really limited resources in that computer.
With very limited resources. And it's very interesting to see, like, what different elements different people try to put in the game. Like, some people would do very dungeon crawling type games where it was more centered about the combat. Other games were, like, more centered around, like, stats or, like, different classes and those sort of things. And then you would have games that were very, like, dialogue heavy, very, like, decision driven. Other games, I mean, I remember, like, Daggerfall from the Elder Scrolls series. Like, that game, it was really trying to implement that freedom and that, like, even though it was limited in other aspects, it really tried to sort of translate to the computer that feeling of, like, you could go anywhere, you could do anything, you could.
Yeah. And that was the first time I felt that in a video game, actually.
There you go. So I think it's really funny that now it's almost the other way around, where I see a lot of games and I myself am very inspired by video games to make role-playing games and to make board games. And one very direct inspiration, for example, is the game Citizen Sleeper, which is it's a role-playing game for, it's a solo game mostly, like, particularly in the solo game space. I find it very easy to take inspiration from video games because video games are solo games, most of them, right? Unless you're playing, like, a multiplayer. You're playing a solo game, and in particular, if you're playing an RPG, it's very interesting to see how the developers create a role-playing experience around a single person, and then some sort of mechanics, or, the computer in this case, that you could create tables or any kind of system. And I think there's a lot to learn from that. And this game in particular, I loved. It has a very interesting system of dice rolling, where, like, you're throwing a bunch of D6 dice at the start of your day, and then you're spending the results that you got into different tasks as you play. And that's sort of the way that you roll dice in the game. Gameplay-wise, it's very similar to something like Disco Elysium, if you're familiar with that. It's very, like, dialogue heavy. Most of the gameplay is reading and that sort of thing. But yeah, I was really inspired by both the setting of that game, the aesthetic, and some of the mechanics to make Astroprisma. I really recommend that game.
Citizen Space, is it?
Sleeper.
Citizen Sleeper.
Yeah.
Hang on, I'm putting a note on that. I will put that in the show notes. And play it myself, because I too love that sort of dice pool system for mechanics, and I don't see it often in role-playing games, actually. I come from board games too, and video games, and one of those things that I've always loved about board games is rolling a bunch of dice and then having to make decisions about how you're going to spend them. So the randomness is the input randomness rather than the output randomness, I think is a really fun thing, and something I don't see often in role-playing games. So yeah, really, really cool. I wanted to ask as well, how did the design process look like for you in terms of play testing? You're laying this stuff out on the screen, presumably digitally designing it and coming up with elements. How was your play testing? Were you doing that sort of analog while looking at the screen, or doing it all digitally, or what did it look like?
Most of the playtesting that I did was analog. I had a very old version of the character sheets that look nothing like the final version, and I would just print those out and just play the game. I had the game on the screen for the events and that sort of thing. But in terms of like character sheets, dice rolling, I pretty much did all of that analog. I started doing some digital playtesting when I made the fulfillable character sheets to make sure that those work, and all of the content that you want to write into those fits on the screen if there's any issues, anything like that. But most of the playtesting that I did was analog, both for the solo version of the game and also for multiplayer. Pretty much did all that with the analog version.
At what point did you get to thinking about what the actual physical production was going to look like? You've been designing stuff for video games, you've been looking at things on screens. At what point did you know you wanted it to be physical and sort of that quality and feel of the book that it turned out to be?
I would say halfway through it. I started at the beginning. I was very open-minded to what the game could be. Like I said, it started as like a much smaller, soft cover zine, and then it evolved into a hardcover book. At the point that I made the choice to make a hardcover book, that's when I started looking into more specifically the materials and the possible printing houses and all of those things. It came, I would say, around pretty much halfway through making the game. That's also something that I learned over time. I got a lot of very, very helpful advice and recommendations from other developers that sort of found the game when I was like posting about it on social media before the campaign or after the campaign, and they made very, very helpful recommendations, because again, I was totally new to the industry. I wouldn't know where you would print a book like that. I mean, I would know local printing houses, but for something that has such a large print run for what I sort of envisioned as like a very indie sort of thing, and especially things like distribution, that sort of thing. That in that sense, I got a lot of very helpful advice from a lot of other developers that made games that I really like. It's something that it's also like a learning experience that I feel like, it takes a certain amount of effort and difficulty to make a book. Then what I'm moving on now to board games, that's a whole nother thing, because you're manufacturing so many other things like pieces, components, and sometimes those things are made in different spaces, and you gotta sort of set up the supply chain or set up every single thing that goes into the box has to be thought about and taken care of and that sort of thing. So it's something that it's quite a lot of work. It's quite a big thing to sort of take on as a challenge. But I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and particularly with some things that, for example, the core book has like UV printing. If you look at the cover, it has the letters and the character. They have a different texture and a different sort of reflection to the light. as the rest of the book, the binding of the book, like all of these little details that, obviously I knew about because I own a lot of books and I'm very interested in role-playing games. But when it comes to the manufacture of these things and the specifics and the whole process of how you gotta put together something like this, something that I learned a lot before making the game. And then when it came time to actually print it and ship it and all these things, all of the advice that I got from people in the industry that knew their stuff and had their experience to advise me in a lot of these things was really useful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, reaching out and talking to people who've done it before is always a good idea. So it was crowdfunded, was it?
Yeah, it was crowdfunded.
How different did it look before the crowdfund, like launching the campaign, and then after? Was it already sort of mostly formed, at least in your head, or did it change a lot through the process?
I would say by the time it was crowdfunded, I would say 80% of it was done. The only remaining bit was content, was me writing more tables or me writing more events and this sort of thing. So in that sense, it changed very little. Like all the art style or all of the sort of core elements were there. It was just basically just finishing that last 20% of content and polishing and playtesting and that sort of thing. Yeah, it was also an interesting process because during the campaign, I made the choice to make the game even bigger than it was supposed to be. So going into the campaign, the game, it would have like 20 or 30 less pages than it ended up having. It would, sorry, some of the expansion content that I had written, I decided to put in the main book already.
Oh, okay.
So I had to come up with new expansion content to make the expansions and that sort of thing. But yeah, everything was pretty much almost all the way there. It was just like writing and finishing tables and polishing that I had to do.
How did you feel going into the campaign? Were you confident that people were going to like it, or you had no idea what their response was going to be?
I had moderate expectations that it was going to be well received, but I didn't know. Again, this was my first campaign, and I was sort of, at the time, I was very obsessed with looking at different campaigns at the time, like similar solo games and that sort of thing, to try to take ideas or try to take, in terms of like marketing or in terms of like presentation, like how are you going to make your trailer, your page, how are you going to make the tiers and that sort of thing. But I was blown away by their response and everything. Like, I remember at the time I sort of made a Excel spreadsheet. This was when I was really looking into all the manufacturing aspect of the game. I was talking to all these different printing houses, and they want to know how many copies you want to print. That affects the cost per copy and a bunch of different things. And I had an Excel spreadsheet that would go only up to like 2,000 books, right? That was like my dream, that if everything goes well in a fantastic world, I will print 2,000 books. I ended up printing over 10,000 books.
Wow.
Way over my expectations. And that was something that caught me by surprise. Like, I knew that the game was at least going to be good enough to be a crowdfunding success, in the sense that it was going to be shipped and it was going to be made, which already is a very
huge
big step. But then from there, the response that I got, and just the mouth to mouth and the huge responses to like the posts that I made, the marketing, all those things, it just went way above my expectations in a way, very unexpectedly, because, for example, I had to change so many of the things that I had planned before. I had to change to a bigger printing house, because the one I made, I contacted, the 3 or 4 that I contacted before, and the one that I thought would be the one that I would choose, they straight up didn't have the capacity to print that many books. The same goes for the shipping company. I mean, I contacted this indie, basically, shipping company that fulfills like indie campaigns, smaller games, that sort of thing. They straight up told me like, we don't have space to put this many books in our warehouse. So in a way, I was very happy about it. In a different way, it took me like months to be able to re-prepare all that work to sort of level up in terms of production and fulfillment to the scale of what it ended up being.
Yeah. I mean, a good problem to have, but a problem nonetheless.
Great
right?
problem to have.
And because I wasn't familiar with it throughout the time of the crowdfunding, but was the soundtrack part of the crowdfunding as well, or was that something you'd always planned to do?
I didn't plan to do it originally, but then when it was time to make the trailer for the game, I was thinking like, okay, once I make the graphics and everything, I sat thinking, okay, what music do I put to this, right? Like, do I want to go and put like a no copyright, like go on YouTube or somewhere and try to find some no copyright song that fits the theme or something like that? And I realized probably the best idea is to do something specific for this. And when I made that, I really enjoyed that process, and that basically gave me the idea to make a whole soundtrack for the game. And once I got the idea, at that point, I only made that first. I didn't even finish the song. I just made like the 20 seconds that you see in the trailer.
Yeah.
And that gave me the idea to put it as like a stretch goal. And that stretch goal ended up being hit. So I got to do the whole soundtrack.
But you had experience, like, had you done video game music before? Or?
Yeah. I would say out of all of the things that I do, music is the one that I'm actually good at.
Okay.
That's the way I would put it in my brain. Like, it feels a little bit, it's like, there's a Spanish saying for this. There's probably something similar in English. But like, if you do a lot of things, you can be not very good at a lot of things, right? And particularly for Astroprisma, for example, I try to do things that I never tried before, things like 3D modeling. I had to learn from scratch, like watching YouTube videos, things like that. Like if you are reading the book and you see the planets, I made those planets in a Blender. Those are 3D models. Or if you see the ships, like in the combat rules section, like the spaceship combat rules section of the book, or the spaceship mods section of the book, that ship is a model that I made in Blender as well. So
interesting.
Yeah, like just the way that I am as like a creative person, I guess. Like I'm the sort of person that I had a lot of interest through my life, through my teenage years, and I sort of jumped from one to another. Like I started with music. That's the one that I put the most hours. That I have 10,000 plus hours in that by far.
Me too.
And that's the one that's the first thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to do music for games. And then as I grew up, I realized that it's very difficult to make music for games. If you're going to be part of like an indie game studio, you probably want to do more things. You probably want to be the one that does the music and the art, the one that does the music and maybe the game design or something like that. So I went to art school. I did that sort of thing. I followed through with graphic design. I worked as like a graphic designer for a few years when I was in university as like a side job. Game design I've been doing since I was like a teenager, trying to make like little games here and there. So there's like a lot of these like different artistic elements, interests that I jumped through over time. But I feel like to make Astroprisma, I had to like use all of them in like different ways. Music is the one that I didn't originally use, but that, especially after I finished the game and all the work that comes with the game, it was almost like therapeutic for me to like now make the soundtrack for the game that I made. Yeah. And it was, I would say that was probably the most fun that I've had making the game. Just being like stress-free once the game's finished, being able to just make music full time.
Icing on the cake.
Icing on the cake. Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, we have over in our Discord, we have a book club where every month or few months we pick a book and everyone gets it to the table, plays it a few times, and then we meet up and talk about our experiences with it. And Astroprisma is our book club book for this month. And so we've been talking about it quite a lot in our Discord, and again and again and again, praise for the soundtrack comes up. People saying that they just adore the soundtrack, it suits the game perfectly, and what a great decision to make, especially since you have that background anyway, but a great decision to make. How can I find music that suits this? I make it, you know. And it really matches. And every time I play, I only listen to the Astroprisma soundtrack. So really, really fantastic.
Thank you. That's great to hear.
When I was looking at the soundtrack, when I was getting started on the game, I think I saw somewhere in one of your profiles or something somewhere where I saw the soundtrack that it said you make music for Astroprisma and future RPGs. Is this something now that you want to do or have started doing?
Totally. I mean, like the experience of making that soundtrack and also a lot of feedback that I've had from people of, you know, them loving to like play the game with the music of the game. It just made me want to do it every time from now on, basically. Every board game, every major release that I do from now on, I would ideally like to make a soundtrack for that as well.
That's really cool. Love to hear that. Speaking of your board game project that you're working on, is that something you're able to or ready to talk about at all, or it's still too early?
I mean, I can talk about some things very generally. It's quite early in terms of development. It just now started to go into like actual like sort of like the theory crafting phase, the ideas, the throwing ideas phase ended like a few months ago, and now I'm actually in the actual production stage of like making art for it every day, making, you know, cards every day, that sort of thing. So I mean, I can talk about some general aspects of the game.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first, is it like what sort of size of game is it? Is it like a small little experience? Is it a big expansive thing? That kind of thing.
That's a great question because
You don't know yet.
No, I know. I had my doubts because size in board games is something that is very, like the scale can go off the charts very easily, right? Like the biggest board game I have is like a small game compared to some of the board games out there that are like huge boxes with like minifigures and all these sort of things, like campaigns for like hours and hours. This, I would say, it would be like a medium to big game. It's content-wise, it's about the same amount of content as Astroprisma, or maybe slightly more, translated into a board game.
Yeah.
And I mean, it has a very big map to explore. It has, I mean, I don't know the exact number right now, but probably over 300 cards to draft and that sort of thing. So it's quite a big game in that sense. For reference, the closest thing that I could think of right now, if you know the board game Earthborn Rangers, it would be a similar thing to that in terms of expansion.
Fantastic. And is it planned as a group game or solo or both?
This one is planned as both. It's meant to be played with the same system and the same mechanics. It works both for solo play and up to 4 players.
And cooperative then?
Yeah, it is a cooperative game.
Yeah, fantastic. Man, that does sound like a lot of work, though. Just the thought of trying to think about how to arrange things in a box so that they fit and, don't, warp and all these other things. But I believe in you that you can do it after your experience with Astroprisma. Tell me, is there anything else planned for Astroprisma specifically, or is it a finished project now?
No, I mean, I would totally want to keep the game alive and keep adding content to the game for as long as I can. My rough idea right now in the sort of planned schedule of releases that I have is that after this big board game release, I would like to do something again for Astroprisma. Probably something different to what I've done before. I'm thinking of like a hardcover book that is a new setting, a new expansion. So, and in that time before that release, I would also like to release like at least one or two new leaflets, like smaller
Hmm.
expansions, building up to that. But yeah, I would now like to probably make something that is um, in that vein, like a large setting expansion. Something that, making the leaflets, I really enjoyed making that all the whole process because um, having so many of them, it enabled me to be able to materialize a lot of very different ideas and be able to
Mm.
take the game in very different ways um, than that one single expansion wouldn't allow me to, and to sort of make each one very different from the other one. But now I would like to do something that gives me enough space and enough um, just room for more encounters, more tables, more maps, like more room to create something in a single setting
Yeah. Dig down
with
into it.
yeah, with the structure of like a hardcore book.
Yeah. Fantastic. For those who don't know, the expansions that I got with my copy in this leaflet form, a really inspired idea. I really appreciate how they just fit. I mean, actually, to be honest, I haven't tried one yet. I've just been playing the thing. But through the ones that I've looked at, they seem to just slot in wherever you want them. And you can sort of plug them in and pull them out again. You know, the one that I talked about on my episode I did last episode was the mercenary one, or the target
Yeah,
one. I can't remember what it's
yeah,
called. And I can just keep playing my game or my campaign. And if I feel like, hey, I want something a bit different, just pull that out, play with that for a while, put it away again, get back into my game. And that modular nature of it is really inspired, I think, especially for a game like this that does succeed in that really tricky area of solo RPG design where there's enough procedure and mechanics in there to keep going through and play a game, but then there's enough space between things to insert as much or as little narrative and story and improvisation and imagination of your own as you want. And that's a really hard compromise to strike, or hard balance to strike, I think. And I think you've really done that with Astroprisma.
thank you. I have to give credit to Mouse Raider here because I got that
Ah, yeah.
idea first from that game. At the time I was thinking of making a traditional expansion for the game, maybe like a zine of like 30 pages or so. But I just had all these different ideas that I wanted to
Mm.
make. And yeah, like seeing Mouse Reader do that same sort of idea in a different format, but just this collection of like different experiences or additions to the game, each one very different from each other, each one almost with its own aesthetic, with its own
Yeah.
sometimes they have different authors. In Astroprisma, I got one written by Jess Levine, which is
Mm.
a different RPG developer. And yeah, I just thought that format and that modularity would both um, enable me to put all of these ideas that I have into um, it's basically materialize them, but also one thing that I wanted to do is to almost like inspire people to make third-party content and
Mm.
like very different ways to make third-party content, right? Like sort of show all the different things that you could possibly do. Like you can make an expansion that is just for new encounters, or some one that is just like a new dungeon, or one that is for like post-game content, one that is for more narrative stuff. Like I just wanted to like show all the different things that you could possibly do with the game
Yeah.
as well.
Perfect. And the fact showing your graphic design background as well, also allowing you to create essentially a piece of art on each of these little leaflets, that it's a self-contained design style, aesthetic, and rules that you can plug in. Just wonderful. And I would be very, very excited to see what you come up with for a deeper dive expansion as well, hopefully one day in the future, as well as any other games that you come up with. This game has really surprised me. A lot of game in a little book. If you haven't checked out Astroprisma, I highly recommend that you go check it out. I will put the link to the web store in the show notes. Is there anywhere else you would suggest people find you on the internet if they want to follow what you're doing?
I would say I want to start doing things with Instagram again for the game. That's probably my main channel. And now it's Astroprisma _ RPG.
Fantastic. Crescent Chimera, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and learning a bit about the origins of this fantastic game. I hope that we can talk again one day in the future about your next project.
I hope so too. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.